Okay, so this is Studio A. There is a wall across from the main door here that will have pretty much every cable, every microphone you can imagine. We have a whole host of dynamic handheld microphones. We also have some Ashton Stealths, which are great microphones, and if you want to learn more about those, you can take a look at our manual. And we also have pretty much every type of cable adapter that a band would ask for. And a lot of the times, bands that come to our station also have, their own gear, the things that they want to bring and the things that they want to connect to. So for the most part, you're going to be covered for equipment to bring. You should be able to just bring yourself and get the band inside and comfortable. But the first thing is to get the band set up, take a look at what equipment that they're actually using, how many vocalists there are, and take the outputs that they have from their instruments or their amplifiers, mic them up, which is, setting up a microphone on a stand, putting it in front of an amplifier, and then taking that cable and running it to the wall with the red digital clock on it, where there is a box that you actually can plug all of their stuff into. So that's actually that box. Yeah. The other one's a false box. There's nothing. It's old. That's a no box. So yeah, you plug into the box on the wall. It's labeled 1 through 8. It actually goes up to 12, and then it also says ABCD. Don't worry about those last 4. Yep. They're useless at the moment, and they might be used in future upgrades. But for now, 1 through 8 is all you're going to need. And you'll also have to let your bands know when they come in that you only have 8 inputs, because sometimes they will actually ask. So you have now set up microphones in front of the vocalist, in front of the amps, the drums. The keyboard is plugged into the wall. Everything is running to the wall.
And the amps that are here, they're available for anyone to use?
They're available to use.
Okay, so if a musician or an artist wants to bring in their own amp, they're also able to do that?
Yes, of course. Yeah. We have some backup equipment for bands if they need it, but for the most part, you want to let them know that they should bring all of the equipment that they would bring to like a concert. Okay. Basically. The other preempt that you should give the band is that they're not playing to a concert audience, so they should be only as loud as they need to be for them to get the proper tone that they want. Or if they want to be really, really loud for the sake of it, that's completely up to them. But it's better for them to just be as loud as they need to be, because it'll pick up nicer on our microphones and it'll get processed through our FM transmitter a lot better. So if we can control the volume on our end and push people harder if we need to, that just ends up being a better live session in general. We can do a lot of tweaking of people's audio for monitor mixes and for the output if they wish to. But the thing is that with FM and with the audio processing that we have, there is a lot going on after the fact if we're outputting live. So not to think too much about it, a lot of this stuff is set up to be as plug and play as possible. You should be able to be as hands off as just making sure things are a proper level and things like are loud enough for people to hear, and then the rest will do its job. We're a radio station, not a recording studio. Right. Our focus is to make sure that we capture the sound and that it gets output, and not necessarily that it, is mixed and mastered before it leaves our station. We have processors in the signal chain that deal with that. Yeah.
And especially if you're doing a pre-record, you can do a lot of the editing after the fact.
Exactly. Getting a strong signal is way more important than making sure that it's like panned properly or something, because those types of things can be fixed in post or get fixed in our signal processing. A lot of the time, like I said, those aren't things you necessarily have to worry about. At the moment with the studio, we don't necessarily have like a headphone monitor mix. So the band has to be loud enough for each other to be able to hear themselves. But otherwise, they should really only be as loud as you need to pick up on a microphone, which obviously isn't very much.
If folks haven't been in a while, they might notice that a control panel that was in Studio A is now in CR1.
Yes. Yeah, so before there used to be a lot of back and forth between Studio A and the control room. I have moved the equipment over so that it is more so within arm's reach of the actual control room desk. And so that way, once you have set up the microphones in Studio A and plugged into the proper channels, and I would suggest writing down what number things are plugged into. So like number 1 is like lead vocalist, number 2 is the guitar, number 3 is the kick drum. If you have that written down and everything is set up, you can now leave the band alone and we move on to CR1.
Can you talk about the different control rooms in CFRC?
There's 3 control rooms in CFRC. We call them CR. CR stands for control room. CR2 is usually what you will see people use for live broadcast output. CR3 is usually for like smaller projects or people just doing recordings for their programming. But CR1 we can use for a lot of different things. It's like our most versatile room. We can use it for bringing bands in, doing large podcast groups, interviews, and things like that. So once you actually sit at the desk in CR1, you will see that in front of you is a mixing desk. And that mixing desk, it's called the Wheatstone DMX. If you're ever curious and want to look at the manual, it is incredibly long. But if you move the faders, you'll see that all of the screens on the bottom will light up and tell you exactly what channel is connected to which thing. Now, you will also notice that from left to right, it will say things like line or mic 1, 2, 3, 4, but it cuts off. It doesn't go all the way up to 8. It goes to 6. If you wish to get channels 7 and 8, you have to turn the scroll wheel at the top of those next 2 faders, and you will see that you will have an option to choose the next one. And once you press down on that scroll wheel, now that channel is ready to be used. So now, with all of those channels set, what you will now have is all 8 of those inputs coming to your board. And you can turn up the fader and turn on the channels, and you should or may be able to hear something, but we aren't fully set up yet. To your left on the control room rack, you will find a box labeled PreSonus Studio 1824C near the top. And there you will also find channels labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are exactly connected to those channels that we plugged into earlier. Those are called preamps, and that is your volume before it even hits the board. So you want to make sure that those are set to an appropriate level where the LCD screen lights up green or even up to orange. And once that is getting an appropriate signal in and you've amplified it enough, then if you go to your board and turn on your fader and turn it up, you'll actually be able to hear what you plugged in. At this point, once you turn those channels on, you should be able to hear everything from Studio A in Control Room 1. So the band might be wondering why they can't hear specific instruments themselves in the room Studio A. So if the band is looking to be able to hear themselves, most of the time they only want to really hear vocals because the vocals might get drowned out by the other instruments. So what you would do is on the fader lining up with the instrument, you press the second button that is on the top, the second square button, the one that says Program 2. If you press it, it lights up, and that audio is now getting sent to Studio A. You can control the volume of that audio getting sent to Studio A with the knob on the far right side that says Studio. That is your studio volume. So yeah, now they should be able to hear themselves. But what if you want to talk to them? Well, there is a button on the board on the far right, just underneath the studio volume knob that says TB. TB is talkback, that industry lingo for being able to talk to people in other rooms. It cuts their audio to themselves so that they can clearly hear the communications coming through. And you tend to use that for things like directions, making sure that they know, when things are coming up. Hey, you have 30 seconds until we go live. Keep an eye on me or keep an eye on the clock. You can also tell people, it sounds great on my end and we're really looking forward to this, all that kind of stuff. Use the talkback button in order to basically break the wall between the soundproof rooms so that it's like you are in there without having to go into that room every single time you want to communicate something. It is a very important thing to do. It comes across as the voice of God, and people always really like it when you use it. In order for them to talk back to you, they will need to be near a microphone, but you should be able to hear basically whatever they're saying if that room is mic'd up as much as it normally will be. If they just talk, you're probably going to hear what they're saying, at least enough to be able to have a conversation between two people. The volume for the talkback is also linked to the studio volume. So if you find that they can't hear you, turn that volume up. This is the first step in having the band record. If you wanted to write from this, you could pull up Reaper onto the computer. It'll ask you some questions when you pull it up. It'll ask you if you want to record in Studio A or just in CR1. You would say yes to the question that asks you if you want to record in Studio A. And what you will find is that it will populate a template for you so that all of those channels have their own distinct track, and you can just hit record. And then what you are seeing and what you are hearing will match up to what is happening in Studio A. And that's all there. So now once it's populated, you will actually see that the numbers on Reaper correspond with your mixer, which corresponds with the preamps. And if you click the record button, all of those channels will record at the same time. You don't have to worry about paring down the amount of channels if you didn't use all 8. You can just do that after the fact. They're just going to be recording silence. It's perfectly fine and normal, and it doesn't really take up space on the computer. So you can just leave it as is and hit the record button, and then just make sure you save it and export it when you're done, like you would another Reaper project. So now that the band can hear themselves, you can hear them, you can record on Reaper. The last step is we want to get this onto the airwaves. So what do we do? Well, for that one, it's a bit trickier because you will actually need one more person. And that one more person would have to be in CR2, which is our main broadcast studio. From CR2, there is a knob or a fader rather, that says CR1. So that takes the audio from this board and pushes it to our live broadcast. It's never connected unless someone manually does that. So you need somebody to be on that other end in order to do that. You shouldn't be doing this on your own. It's a lot of back and forth. Minimum 2 people working on something like this. You'll find that it's a lot of setup and a lot of coordination. So you might even want more people, but at least 2 people should be involved. 1 to work in CR1 and to get the mix right, and 1 to be in CR2 to actually get the audio to air.
So CR1 is where you do any fine-tuning of individual channels. Once it gets to CR2, it's just adjusting the volume that goes out to listeners on air.
Yeah. So CR1 would be, imagine it in the process of like a CD or something, or like you're trying to play a track on air. That's the level that you want CR1 to be completed, and sending that level of audio out. The audio that goes to CR2, they can't adjust it. They can't make adjustments other than making sure that it's loud enough. And that's kind of their role, is to just monitor and make sure that the audio I'm receiving actually sounds good and there's no problems. It's basically double checking as well as your gateway to having an actual FM and online broadcast.
So if you've used CR2 for live broadcasting, it's basically the same as playing from a computer or record there.
Yeah, it's literally like for the person in CR2, it is exactly the same as playing off the computer, playing off of your phone, whatever you're using. Their role is to just turn that on at the right time and turn it up. And they can communicate that with you. So usually you would use the windows, and you'll notice that the windows are mostly blocked up except for a few. And that's so that you can actually look at each other and do hand signs to be like, now, you are now live. What is coming through your board is what is being broadcast. And then you, as the commander of this whole project, you can point to the band and let them know we're live now. And your role as the in-between person is to actually mix things to make it sound good. The role of the gateway person in CR2 is just to make sure it gets on air and to double check that it sounds good. And the role of the band is to be completely hands off and to just do what they do best, which is to play. And that is how you would set up Studio A for a band.
Thank you for joining us for this video on how to set up Studio A, another new CFRC training segment brought to our volunteers through the generous support of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radiometres program.